What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the E-commerce Influence Podcast. My name is Austin Bronner, and I am fired up to bring you an episode with Matt Baer. Matt is the CEO of Enquire Labs, and I've been following what they've been doing for quite a while, because as we've all known, if you're spending money on Facebook, spending money on ads, it's hard to figure out where people are coming from. And Enquire has created a post-purchase survey to help you do that. I stumbled across them a couple years ago and thought they were super interesting. We're getting like 50% of people to fill out a quick survey on the checkout page, and it really helped us figure out, what was effective marketing and what was not. So today we talk all about what they're doing, how they have helped brands, mostly, they're all working with Shopify Plus brands, figure out attribution in the midst of the chaos of iOS changes. So it's an excellent episode. You'll get a lot of interesting tips, and I think you'll enjoy it if you're running a brand, running performance advertising, whatever. So without further ado, let's bring Matt into the show. Matt, welcome to the show. Excited to have you here.
Awesome. Thanks for having me on. Excited to dive into it.
Yeah, man. And so I got to tell you that I've been kind of following you guys for a while. I can't remember exactly when I first found you. I think one of my clients shot me an email and was like, hey, you got to check this thing out. It's a post-purchase survey. You can install it on Shopify and start tracking sales. And I think that was about 2 years ago, maybe a little bit over 2 years ago. And we installed it, started going really well. And I've told so many people about it, and I'm glad to tell more people about it now on the podcast. But you got to be feeling pretty good about timing. You built this post-purchase survey, and then all the tracking on Facebook basically breaks, doesn't work nearly as well. Did you have a crystal ball? Did you plan this? Were you the one that convinced Apple to block some of the pixels?
I wish. Yeah. We actually started the business, or the app rather, and it went live in the App Store May 6, 2018. So it took about 2.5 years for Apple and everyone to kind of get moving in our direction.
Yeah.
But yeah, as of the last 6 months, things are definitely been very good for us, just because I think people are really starting to just want alternative methods of tracking. And it's funny. I've been in e-commerce since 2010, 2011. And when I first got into it, Shopify was kind of this baby still. It was all Magento and Hybris and Demandware.
I remember that.
Yeah, it's not, you don't hear those names too often.
You don't
anymore.
hear about Magento, and Magento is a huge player.
Yeah, the biggest. And now Commerce Cloud, everything's been rebranded and bought. But when I got into e-commerce, Facebook, I don't know anyone that was really spending on Facebook yet. And I just remember I had a small consultancy with someone 20 years my senior, and we were just working with a bunch of mid-sized retailers, 10 to 100 million, just doing consulting. And I was it was kind of like my e-com MBA. And I remember very often we'd look at someone's media mix and we'd draw a pie chart and say, where is your traffic coming from? And we'd always push to have a distributed traffic mix, because in 2010, 2011, your Google CPC strategy could go out the window, your organic strategy could go out the window. All of these things were not as reliable as Facebook was for so long.
Yeah.
And I feel like we've now kind of come back around where people are okay, I need to measure all channels. I can't be too dependent on one channel. Let's capitalize where we can, but again, we just need to be smart moving forward. So it's been kind of interesting for me to kind of see this cycle. And yeah, I wish I had a crystal ball, but more or less things just came in the right direction.
Well, it's worked out for you guys, and you've been a powerful tool to help merchants navigate this time where it has become a lot more difficult to figure out attribution. And I think from my perspective, I kind of see it became relatively easy, right? So you could go to one source of truth and look at Facebook and say, okay, we're gonna measure based off of this, and then have use this as kind of our judge when we want to spend more, what we want to do, especially if you're a paid social first brand. But that's kind of changing, right? So how did you come up with the idea? What was the first iteration of Enquire?
Yeah, so it was April 2018. I was advising a handbag company here in New York. They're called Cara Sport. Still around, still crushing it. And if you looked in their Google Analytics, all of their conversions were coming through branded search, organic, or direct. Their Facebook pixel, they weren't spending a ton on Facebook. So there was, maybe that was like 30-40% of their revenue. And then there's this huge chunk of revenue. I was like, where's this coming from? So low 7-figure brand, unable to understand how they're scaling. So I suggested to them, hey, just go out a survey post-purchase. We quickly found out that wasn't as easy as we thought it was going to be. There was no app that we could find that did it. At the time, we used an app that allowed you to add HTML to the order confirmation page. And then we went and created a Google form and just dropped the script into the HTML. So it worked. It just looked
not clean.
Not clean at all. It was a Google form. And the big thing after having that live for about a month was Aaron, the CEO of Care, was like, oh, like someone just wrote in that they heard about us through this like X influencer. And it was like, who was this? And I was like, I have no idea. Like we can look at the timestamp and assume, but there's no order data coming to the survey response. So that was like the idea as far as like, could we build this? And at the time we were doing a ton of consulting and advising, but we were also working on a B2B SaaS in the same day delivery space that was still trying to find product market fit. And I think my business partner, I turned to him and pitched him the idea, and within like a minute, he was like, oh yeah, let's just like jam on this for a day or two and see what's possible. And then we had a working prototype, I think about 2 weeks, and then it took about a month to approve us in the App Store. But that's how I got started. I think earlier on, it was like, I think we charged $5 or $10 for everyone. And it was like, oh, if we get a couple hundred customers, this will be a nice little kind of side income here. I never really thought what it could be until about a year and a half, like a month or two before COVID. I think that's when we started to realize, oh, like we're starting to work with 100 or so Shopify Plus brands. They're asking us for features. Like this probably is a little bit more than kind of this simple app that we thought it was.
Yeah. And you guys have fast forward, you guys have some pretty big names on your platform using this. What are some of the companies that you guys are excited about that have signed up in the last year?
Yeah, we work with like Allbirds, who IPO'd today. Like that's definitely a great logo to have. Their team is awesome.
Was it $5 billion valuation?
It is, yeah. I bought like 4 shares through the Robinhood pre-IPO, and I think I've made $50 so far.
There you go.
just to own a tiny piece. Allbirds, Fashion Nova, Maiden, Mack Weldon. We work with, it's just shy of 1,000 Shopify Plus brands. So yeah, for the most part, we're working with a large segment of like the well-known Shopify D2C brands.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense. So the way it kind of clicked for me, I was like, if you were running, I always try to think about an online store and its parallel with a boutique or something, a brick and mortar store. And you think about how people ask and figure out how people found them. It's like, so how did you find us? It's like just a natural question that you'll ask if you're a salesperson or checking somebody out. And really it was challenging to do that. One of the things that I noticed from working with a couple of brands was just a little bit of like depending on how like the average order value and the cycle, the difference between attribution, what they thought it was, and then the post-purchase survey, right? That's one of the things that I thought was quite interesting. The higher the average order value, the less likely that the attribution model or results they're getting from analytics seem to match the survey results. Are you seeing the same sort of thing? Is that kind of common? Or what are some things you've learned from working with a bunch of different brands about what they think their sales are coming from versus where their sales are actually coming from?
Yeah, I think that's definitely a big one, like AOV, higher AOVs, long purchase consideration window. Your Facebook ad attribution is going to be a little bit off. I think the one thing that people are finally waking up to is Facebook was capturing like so much share of conversion value than what was actually happening. And the example I give is if we were to talk about something, let's say a grill. I saw you guys had the Traeger guys on recently, and then I were to Google that, I'm going to now get, and let's say I've never been to their site, or I'm starting to just research it. I'm not going to their site. Then I go to Facebook. Facebook's going to put me in this like real top of funnel awareness audience. Oh, he's never been to the site before. And then they're going to convert me, and then they're going to get the credit for driving the sale. When in reality, maybe, like I'm sure their word of mouth is very high.
Like a podcast. I mean, I've heard on Traeger on a ton of podcasts. You may be like, oh, you listen to a podcast, you go Google it, try to figure it out, then you're in the top of funnel Facebook audience.
Yeah, exactly. And then Facebook gets all the credit for that, when in reality it was the podcast or word of mouth or some other channel that is much, maybe an influencer that's just harder to measure. So I think that's been the kind of most fun, just talking to brands. And I think a lot of the customers that we work with are just getting smarter because they now have this like transparent view into what's actually happening. Like, as you know, like one screen on our kind of responses page, which we're about to do some really cool stuff with. But what it shows you is response compared to last click UTM parameter. And what that allows you to do is just like see how like stochastic and random paths to purchase are. And a lot of it's like Google CPC and all of these things that really drove that last click lower funnel conversion. But then it's like, hey, like someone will write in, hey, my mom told me about the brand or something. It's like, well, good luck measuring that and investing further in that channel. So that's probably the thing that we get most excited about, is talking to brands. And a lot of them are, whether it's starting with the how did you hear about us question, and then on the attribution side, maybe adding like, when did you first hear about us, to under that consideration window, and just start to like build this 3D model of what's actually driving conversions on their site versus, again, historically it was, you could scale a brand to probably 8-9 figures with solely Facebook as your core channel. Yeah. That's been exciting to us over the last 6 or so months.
I think another interesting side of it is around word of mouth, right? And the fact that word of mouth is like the most powerful channel. And for a long time, it was not very easy to measure that, right? And from a brand's perspective, if you realize, if you put up a post-purchase survey and you realize, a good chunk of our sales is coming from just word of mouth, then you can adjust your spend and realize, oh, wow, we actually maybe have something more powerful than we even thought, right? Because I think most of the brands that I've ever worked with that have been the most successful have the highest word of mouth. Yeah,
exactly. And even on top of the word of mouth thing, like understanding the percentage of word of mouth is important. Understanding how that changes over time is, I'd say, way more important. In the sense of, am I getting more virality, less virality? Are more people talking and recommending about my product or not? And that could help steer, like, obviously marketing, a ton of things that could be there, but also product development. You launch a new product, word of mouth starts to drop. Is our reputation, like how much of a brand are we building essentially, versus how much of a commodity that might not get talked about. And as you said, like the best brands have a very high portion of word of mouth. The brands that, and we don't do any aggregate metrics or anything through our, like, we're very privacy first in the sense, and we don't want to give away any secrets. But the brands doing a lot of volume have very different channel mixes than the ones that aren't. And mind you, it takes a bit to scale there and to be able to look at more of like a linear regression than just maybe a pixel conversion and whatnot, more momentum on the brand equity side. But again, small brands should start thinking about these really early on, and how that evolution will happen for them.
Sure. So for people who are struggling right now with Facebook advertising and realizing like, oh man, what I thought was working or what was working previously is no longer working, and now I don't know how much I can spend or what type of a halo effect I actually get from advertising on Facebook. What are some, like, how would you recommend they start tracking using post-purchase surveys? What are some simple things that they could do? What's like the bare minimum? And then what are some more advanced things you're seeing that people are doing?
Yeah, my advice for that really starts around attribution. It's not really around post-purchase surveys yet. I think it's just understanding the ways in which you can solve attribution. So it's studying, maybe it's just running simple regressions as far as I spent this month, I spend this, and just having the knowledge of how those functions work. Understanding like a multi-touch solution like Rockerbox, how does that work? And really just building a better mental model around attribution. So that's kind of like my first piece of advice.
You said people. Rocket, what was it? Rocket what?
Rockerbox. It's a multi-touch attribution. We integrate with them. Have a ton of customers using them. And that's multi-touch. It's very advanced. I think on that side, post-purchase surveys have done very well because of like Occam's razor, essentially. It's like the easiest solution is typically the best one. And it's just because you see the data. You can understand it. You can act on it very quickly versus this was the 5th touch in 8 touches. What does that mean? You know what I mean? Yeah, sure. And as with regards to attribution and post-purchase surveys, what we like to suggest people to do is start to build internal tools to understand and measure attribution. So not just the first part was kind of let's understand how it works. And now it's like, okay, how do we think about this? And the more brands do that, the more they'll get comfortable with diversifying spend. Be able to say, hey, we can invest $5, $10, $20, $30,000 into a channel because we've created these tools to allow us to measure them. Post-purchase surveys, we would obviously argue works on all channels. It's very much top of funnel. It can capture almost anything. But just being able to be comfortable in making those decisions will allow you to do that versus a lot of brands we see today, even ones that kind of venture-backed ones that are kind of kicked off in the last 12, 24 months, a lot of them still rely on Facebook. They're following a very similar playbook. Yeah. And my biggest advice to them is like go and excel a bit more, start to just think about this. How much did you spend? How much did you get back? Like, can you scale a $4 CPC for an $80 AOV product with less than a 10% conversion rate? Like probably not. And that kind of math function, I think, helps people really understand how to just drive the ship moving forward.
Sure.
And then on the survey side, like, again, we recommend everyone ask all of their customers how they heard about them. Essentially, like we call it progressive profiling. This data attaches to a customer ID. It could be used long-term to understand LTV.
Connects to Klaviyo, right?
Connects to Klaviyo.
Yeah.
And just capturing, it's very hard to get that data in the past. You want to capture it as quick as possible. Like if somebody, like we work with Boll and Branch, for example, they've been around for over 5 years. So if you're asking a customer, a returning customer, how they heard about you, it's probably not going to be overly valuable. So getting this data and setting this up as quick as possible and building out that foundation of where new customers are coming from is definitely what we recommend.
Cool. So what are you excited about? I know you guys are building a bunch of stuff. It's transitioned from just an app that you guys whipped up to now rolling out new features. What's something that you are excited about?
Yeah, our flagship feature, it's enabled for about a third of our customers right now. It's going to be rolling out to everyone in the next week or two. It's called a question stream. That's definitely like our core focus. And the whole concept of question stream is to decouple questions from each other. So historically, you have surveys, they're a monolith. Everyone has gone into SurveyMonkey or Google Forms at one point and created 5 questions. And they always live together and they get sent via email or a pop-up, and that's kind of where it ends. Yeah. And what we've done with Question Stream is just decouple those because like we know people aren't going to want to answer 100 question surveys or even 10 question surveys. So, hey, let's ask them these questions over time. Let's ask different questions to different people. And where we're investing a lot next year is getting a little bit more programmatic around asking those questions. So why can't we reorder the questions to increase the completion rate, for example, and do that dynamically on the fly and kind of allow it to get smarter and smarter every time we serve a survey. So that's definitely where we're focusing on. It's like the idea of progressive profiling, a continuous stream. And we called it question stream because we want people to think of it like they're kind of GA data that's just flowing. Maybe it's getting piped into Klaviyo or piped into Rockerbox or their own data warehouse and allowing them to make informed decisions in real time.
And would that allow people, so when you say question stream, if somebody wants to keep answering questions, can they?
Yeah, exactly. So
okay.
Yeah. So we allow, it's not overly smart now. We allow targeting for like, has this customer answered this question, yes or no? If they already have, we're not going to show it to them. Let's target new versus returning customers. And we'll add a whole slew of variables along with custom variables to that.
Sure.
But what we've noticed is it's kind of funny. So our average completion rate is around 55% for the first question. Second question varies between 50 and 70. Pretty consistently. And then 3rd through 10th, it like jumps up to 95%. So it's
like there's some people that are just going to go through them all.
Oh yeah, exactly. It's like, it gets very sticky. So we're definitely excited. Like we haven't dove too much into the data there, but there's just a ton of stuff to learn and build and engineer on that side to help increase conversion rates and measure the other thing we're really thinking about is just measuring the accuracy of this data. I think that's where a lot of people are hesitant maybe to install us. It's like, hey, the customer is providing this. Like, what does that mean? It's not a click in the declarative, definitive sense.
It's qualitative. It's qualitative, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're looking at like one thing we don't offer yet is discount codes for survey completions. Why don't we do that? Because we know once you once you provide an incentive, it's going to change the output of the survey. Sure. So the way we're thinking about building that is, hey, let's A/B test it. Like these people got a got something these people didn't, or hey, this customer always selects the first response. We should probably throw that out the window because he clearly just wants the code. So that's some of the other stuff. Like we're really trying to invest more in the survey science and how do we allow customers to trust this data, because we know who the customer is. It's a lot easier for us to do this than a Qualtrics to do it because we know exactly who we're asking questions to.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was excited about when you guys first launched, and I saw it. I was like, well, we have a lot of quantitative data coming from Google Analytics, from Facebook, and now we can kind of pair this with some more very easy qualitative data that doesn't make it that challenging for somebody. It's like right there at the end, and the completion results that we are getting was so ridiculously high for the question at the end, the question survey at the end. I was like, okay, this is working really, really well.
Yeah.
Is there anything you've learned, or when you guys have worked with a bunch of really large brands, anything that you would share that smaller brands should be thinking about, or things that you realize, kind of takeaways from having a unique vantage point?
Yeah, I think it's just I kind of alluded to this before, but just understanding how the media mix is going to change over time, and being comfortable with that. The brands that we talk to the most, who do the most outreach to us, are the ones they might not even be that small or that large, but the ones are definitely trying and testing new things and are using us in certain ways. And like the amount of times that we get pinged being like, our biggest channel is X. I didn't know that before Enquire. It used to be Facebook and now it's not. Like that
Wow.
Definitely is what, like, I'm assuming you could probably imagine what channel that is, judging by what's kind of happened over the last 6 to 12 months. But it's still very hard to measure. Like they don't have the predictive conversion tracking like Facebook. Yeah, that's kind of been the thing that when I talk to brands, are like, what do I do? I'm like, you think about this channel or other channels and how you can, like, it might be an influencer strategy. It might be going through the paid channel or not. But just being flexible in how you think about it is definitely you could scale a brand today without Facebook. Like I could guarantee you that, as long as you have ways to measure different channels, and the kind of fortitude to like invest and see what's working and what's not.
Yeah. I interviewed a guy named Chris Mead, the founder of CrossNet. Do you know CrossNet? So CrossNet, it's this game. It's a 4-way volleyball game, and it's really hard to understand until you've played it. And so their first big growth channel was literally going to the beach in Miami Beach, playing CrossNet, inviting strangers to play with them, getting a huge line, and then giving the person who was the most excited about CrossNet that day the free CrossNet and having them take it home and play with their friends. And they realized, oh man, we're starting to get sales from all over the country, and we're not doing any advertising besides just this. That's one of those places where, like, it's so challenging to start getting, like, to measure that, unless you can ask the questions. Someone can be like, oh, my buddy, set it up and a friend told me about it. We played the game. It was super fun, because ultimately that's what happened to me. The first time I played it, a friend purchased it, and I went and played it at a bachelor party. Thought it was so much fun, and now I've told like a bunch of people about this game, and they're going to think about buying it. And that type of growth has just been impossible to measure.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like, I actually listened to that podcast earlier today.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, in preparation for this. So yeah, that's a very good point. And I think Chris, right? Chris, yeah, he was like definitely went against the pack in the sense of how he scaled that. And
yeah,
I think they were really just trying to learn early on, and we were able to make those commitments. But given the fact that he wasn't like, we're just going to keep spending on Facebook for a thing that obviously was brand new. I think you mentioned like you're creating demand for something because it doesn't even exist.
Yeah,
before.
I think that's one of the more challenging things when you're like trying to create demand for a product, right? Yeah. Like if it's completely brand new, you can be a lot more challenging unless it's like an impulse purchase from Facebook.
Yeah, exactly.
What are some of you talked about big, like high average order value products? At what range or what level do you see it kind of splinter where it becomes more challenging to track because people start to, like, the sales cycle gets longer?
Yeah, for us, I think, I don't know, like anecdotally, it's around like $150. I think you could just use like what is an impulse buy and what is not, essentially.
Yeah, maybe even less to do with money and more to do with like the product.
Yeah, exactly. And like, yeah, there's a ton of variables into that. Like I probably have access to a couple hundred GA accounts at this point. And you can just see conversion rates vary greatly among AOV. Sure. Like that's just how it works. But again, like high AOVs could still have higher, like not like 3.5% conversion rates. But with our survey data, we see that like it still takes a while for someone to convert. So like what's your media mix? Is it a ton of top of funnel? Because if it is, you're going to have a much lower conversion rate, and you just have to like the economics of that probably won't work out. So like anecdotally, yeah, it really runs the gamut. I can think of a brand now as AOV is like 250, and their conversion rate is 4.5%. They just happen to find really good product market fit. But again, it still takes most of their customers over 2 weeks to buy. So, yeah.
So I know you're building a Web 2 app, but are you getting excited, swept up in this Web 3 craze that's on Twitter?
Not so much. No? I'm trying to stay focused. I think there's maybe a world where question streams lives in the Web 3 component in the future. I would say I'm not spending too many cycles on that. But yeah, I don't know. My favorite book is Ready Player One. And I don't know if it's the world I want to live in the future, but like a lot of what's happening today feels very much like Ready Player One or is about to happen. So kind of just have to prepare. I think we have plenty of time to build a large business without really worrying about Web3, but staying up to date is definitely
important. It's interesting, especially on Twitter, right? It's kind of all encompassing if you're in the tech world right now. There's just so much noise about it. I don't know if you followed the Neo Tokyo NFT launch at all.
I didn't know.
So I know you like Ready Player One. The way that they did their initial launch was kind of similar to Ready Player One, where it was a big scavenger hunt where you had they released all these clues and you had to solve this, and the first people that got in were getting like this free mint NFT, and then they could then flip that and turn it around and make money off of it. But they keep like the whole thing is this really elaborate game, and people have to, and the way that you get access to different NFTs is by solving and finding the clues and solving it. It's really interesting.
Oh wow! So we're already there, is what you're saying.
we're there. We're like getting closer to being there. Yeah, man. Well, Matt, this has been really interesting. Thanks for hopping on, man, and talking about it. I'm super excited about what you're doing. I've been one of your biggest evangelists, and I think you're a huge tool in the arsenal towards solving the challenges we face on Facebook and in paid social and in tracking. So keep it up and keep grinding on it. I think it's in the right direction. Where can people find you if they're interested? What's the best channel to connect with you? Are you on Twitter, Instagram?
Yeah, Twitter, it's just Matt R. Barr. Feel free to email me too. If anyone, we do a lot of one-on-ones with current customers. Like we work with a couple methodologists who are essentially our survey experts in writing questions. If anyone wants to email me and just go deeper, whether you're a customer or not, happy to always chat. And that's just matt@enquirelabs.com.
Who's the best type of person to sign up? Like who will get what size of business do you typically recommend?
It honestly runs the gamut. I would say if you're doing over 500 orders a month, our product definitely starts to add more value because you're getting more responses. If you're doing 100 orders a month, you're going to get 50 responses. It's kind of hard to lean into that. So definitely a little bit of growth there. But from like we work with like everyone, like companies doing 500 orders to a couple of companies doing a couple million orders a month. So it really runs the gamut there.
Cool. Matt, thanks so much, man.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
Talk to you later.
See ya. Thanks. Bye.